Hey church, great to be with you today. My name's Aaron, and thank you to all those that's been filling out the contact form. And would you do that again here today? It would mean a lot to us here on staff, and I'm excited for our time together today. And as we jump into worship, I invite you just to let your praise out, and Jesus deserves all of it.
Surrounding me, there's a weapon of worship that brings defeat. It echoes heaven on the earth. Oh. When the walls and the giants are all I see, there's a song that I shout till there's victory. Nothing's impossible when I praise your name. Sing it again. Here comes a miracle. Nothing's impossible. God, you're unstoppable. Nothing's impossible when I praise your name. Oh, your name. And all your praise is living in my lungs. I'm gonna let it out. I'm gonna let it out. And all your praise is on the tip of my tongue. I'm gonna let it out. I'm gonna let it out. Oh, I'm gonna let it out. Oh, I'm gonna let it out. Oh, I'm gonna let out your praise. Sing, oh, I'm gonna let it out. Oh, I'm gonna let it out. Oh, I'm gonna let out your praise. Come on, let's let it out together. Gonna let it out.
Welcome. I am so glad that you're joining with us today. My name is Jason. I'm the lead pastor here at Corbett, and we are diving into week number 6 of our study on the book of Mark, looking at his perspective and learning how he saw Jesus and what he wants us to know. And a part of that is understanding that Jesus came to serve. He did not come to be served, but he came to serve. And we've been trying to live that out over the past 6 weeks. We've been trying to actively reach out to people and reach out to our community to check in with them, to see how they're doing, and to serve them. And you have been doing a phenomenal job at that. I want you to keep it up, keep it going. I want to share one story with you. There's a family who was hit hard with some rough news near the end of 2020. Their adult son was diagnosed with cancer and had some mobility issues, and you've been reaching out. You have provided meals and finances and words of encouragement, and I want to thank you so much. And I want to read an email that I got from them. It says this: "Hi, Pastor Jason. I just wanted to give you a shout out to our church family and friends for the prayers, the calls, the emails, and the messages for our son who is fighting cancer and mobility issues. We have been so blessed with the financial gifts for him as well, and they will greatly help him as he cannot work during this time and in the months ahead. We feel truly blessed." On behalf of them, thank you so much for reaching out. Keep it going. Remember this 1045 challenge: to live as Jesus lived, to serve others and to put others' needs ahead of ours. Keep the stories coming. Keep sending those in, because we want to celebrate what God is doing in and through each and every one of you. Today, I want to take you back to the first time that you felt the weight of responsibility, that you felt like maybe you were in a little bit over your head, that somehow you were put in charge of something for the first time, and you know what it's like. You kind of sweat a little bit. You're like, man, if this fails, it's all on me. If I drop the ball, that's it. The pressure starts to build. You know how it feels. I know that each of you have been there at some point. What's your first instinct? Is it to dig in, to go deep and go hard, or is it to panic? Is it to stand back? One of the times in my life that I think I panicked, honestly, a little bit was the day we brought our oldest child home from the hospital. If you're a parent, you know you've been there. You're in the hospital, and you know the nurses are kind of taking care of you. Everything's kind of working out, and things feel great. And then that knock comes on the door. The knock you knew was going to come eventually, but you didn't want it to. You know, the knock that says, "Hey, it's time to go home." And I mean, you're excited about it, but I know for me, as I was carrying my son in the baby bucket all the way out to the car, there's just this sense of, oh man, I'm in charge. I'm responsible. It's on me. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna be on me. I mean, I was confident that we could do it, but I was still terrified. And to be honest with you, there are still days that 10 years in, I'm still terrified. I feel a little bit over my head. Mark chapter 9 is where we're studying today, and we encounter the disciples, and that's where they're at. They're in way over their head. To give you a little bit of a background, Jesus has left them for a while. He's taken a couple disciples with him up a mountain, and they're interacting and they're connecting with God in an amazing way with the Transfiguration. And we're picking up the story as they're coming back down the mountain. So if you've got your Bibles, I invite you to open up to Mark chapter 9. We're looking at verses 14 through 29. It says this: "When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law were arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. 'What are you arguing about?' he asked. A man in the crowd answered, 'Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of his speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not.' 'You unbelieving generation,' Jesus replied. 'How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring me the boy.' So they brought him to him, and the spirit saw Jesus and immediately threw the boy into convulsions. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, 'How long has he been like this? From childhood?' He answered, 'It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us.' 'If you can,' Jesus said, Everything is possible for one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you to come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and he came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, the disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." The situation that the disciples find themselves in our passage today is not unfamiliar to them. They have the power and the authority, and they have in the past cast out demons. They've seen Jesus do it, and they have done it themselves. And in fact, we know that this authority that Jesus has been given down to them, because in Mark 3 it says this: as Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. We see it highlighted again in Mark chapter 6, verse 7. It says, calling the 12, those same 12, to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. They have the authority of Christ. He has given that power to them. But in this instance, they fail. They fail very, very badly. They fail very publicly. But why? Why is this time different than the previous ones? What is missing here? And there is something missing. There's something that they've overlooked. And in verse 19, Jesus lends us some ideas as to where they have faltered. It says this, it says, "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." Now, it's not really clear as to whether Jesus is speaking directly to the disciples about that or the crowd in general. It's probably a little bit of both. And many scholars would read this and say that Jesus is frustrated here. And I don't doubt that that's the case, that he is frustrated, but I can't help but think it's a frustrated compassion that Jesus is extending to his disciples, that they've forgotten something, that they've tried to do this on their own power, and now they lack faith, and they have failed publicly. It's really hard when you fail publicly because there's no backtracking. All of a sudden, things are out there, and it's done that way. I'm sure that the disciples recovered in that town and in that area, but there was something that they had to learn, something more that they needed. So they went to Jesus privately, and we see in verse 29 that they're asking, 28 and 29, they're asking Jesus, "What did we do wrong? What did we miss in this case?" And in verse 28, he replies, "This kind can come out only by prayer." When I read this, it seems to me like the disciples were trying their best. They were doing all of the things that they thought they needed to do, and all the things that they had done in the past that seemed to work, but it didn't work. It wasn't good enough. You see, I think that they forgot in the midst of it, in the commonality maybe of casting out demons and performing miracles, if that can actually exist, in the commonality of it, they lost their focus on where they got their power from, that they got it from Jesus, and they didn't tap into that source. Jesus says that this can only come out by prayer, so it leads me to believe that they forgot to pray. In this passage, in this verses 14 through 29, we see 2 very different ways to react when you find yourself in over your head. First is the disciples. They reacted poorly. We understand that. We see that. It is a very public disgrace that they face. I don't think it was on purpose. I think they walked into the situation going, "Yeah, we've done this before. We can do this again. This is no big deal." But I think they tried to do it on their own power. It's clear that they did. If they had relied on the power of Jesus, we wouldn't have this story. It just would have been another in the list of miracles they were able to perform. They knew it. They knew that they had done it. They'd done it before. And I think you've been there. You've been You've been in that same type of situation. I know I have. Just like the disciples, you feel comfortable, maybe a little complacent, and you get forgetful about what has brought you from where you were to where you are. Maybe life has been good, and you start to get comfortable in that place. You start feeling very reliant on yourself rather than reliant on the Spirit and reliant on God. You start saying, you know what, I've got this. This is no big deal. And when some problems come your way, you're like, oh, I can handle that. That's not a big deal. I can walk through that. I can work this out. But then there's this thing. There's this old sin. There's this old habit that just creeps back into your life. Maybe it's lustful thoughts. Maybe it's words of doubt and deceit in your own life. Maybe it's gossip, or maybe it's gluttony, or language, or like you start swearing and those old habits start popping back up. Maybe it's anger. Maybe you're frustrated and you just can't figure it out, and it starts to well up, and you think, I've got this, I can do this, and you start pushing it back down. Maybe it's something that you thought was conquered, dead and gone and beaten, but it's back. I think that happens to all of us, and I think we forget what Jesus is telling the disciples they forgot. We forget to pray. The second way that we can react, and the second character that highlights this for us, is the father of the child who is sick. In Mark chapter 9, verse 21 through 24, Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," Jesus said, "everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Now that's a prayer. He didn't get down on his knees. He didn't maybe say all the right words that you and I might think we need to say when we come into the presence of God, but that is a prayer right there. I do believe. Help my unbelief. He's not even sure that Jesus can do what he's asking him to do. He's stepping out, hoping, praying, believing, even in the midst of his doubt, that Jesus might be able to save his son. Do you realize what he's saying? He's saying, help me, a doubter, someone who isn't entirely sure. Will you help me, God? Will you help me understand and help me believe? He realizes that he doesn't have the amount of faith, that he realizes that he's not worthy of his son being healed, that he's in the presence of something great. He's not asking for God to heal for Jesus to heal his boy based on the amount of faith he has. He's throwing himself at the feet of Jesus, begging, knowing how unworthy he is. True faith is always aware of how inadequate it really is. Let me say that again. True faith is always aware of how inadequate it is. Jesus has overcome my sin. Jesus has overcome your sin. And when I think about that, and when I read this passage, I only have victory in my life because of him. I only have victory over anger and sin and all of those things because of him. And that tells me that I need to continually go to the source of my victory in order to maintain it. I need to be seeking God out in prayer. Mark 9:29 again. He replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." The disciples forgot to pray. All throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus modeling this lifestyle of prayer. We see him late at night going to pray. We see him early in the morning going and seeking prayer, going away he's withdrawing from the crowds, going to quiet places to pray. That every time there is this miracle or this big event that happens in Jesus' life, it is preceded by prayer. We see in Matthew 14:23, it says, he had dismissed them, and he went up onto the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there all alone. Mark 1:35 says, early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Paul encourages us to live a life full of prayer. This dawn till dusk. This 24-hour thought process on prayer. He talks about in 1 Thessalonians. He says, "Rejoice always, pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." We have to pray in the same way that Jesus did. We need to do it first and foremost. I am nothing apart from prayer. I can't be a good pastor to you or anyone else if I don't pray. I can't be a good husband without prayer. I don't have a chance of being a good dad and a good parent without prayer. The more time I spend in prayer with God, the more time I get into His presence, and the more time I get to know Him is how I become more and more like Him. I start to act like Him and sound like Him and think like Him. And the less I begin to think and am like myself. I want to be more like Him and less like me. Maybe today you're in over your head. Maybe there's a situation or a sin that's kind of crept up on you, or there's this thing that's in front of you that you can't even name right now. This feeling, this spirit, if you will, that's in front of you, and you're in over your head. Listen to me. Prayer needs to be our first response, not our last resort. It can't be our last option. It can't be our last ditch effort. I was chatting with a friend of mine earlier this week, and he was saying that his daughter-in-law, they foster children, and they've got a little guy with them that just doesn't have a whole lot of options in front of him. So they're considering adopting him themselves and trying to make his home with them. But they've been hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, just trying to figure this out, and they're becoming frustrated. And one night at a family discussion, they were just chatting, and her mother piped up and said, "You've tried a lot of things. Well, have you prayed? Have you prayed about it?" Prayer must become our first response, not our last resort. I've been a dad for 10 years, and some days I think I should have this all figured out. I should have it figured out. If I figured it out for Roman, I should be able to figure it out for Grady, and I should be able to figure it out for Harper. But it's all different, and it's all changing, and I need to daily, moment by moment, come to God in prayer and ask for His guidance and His help and His patience for me to be able to be anywhere near the Father that they deserve and need. I've been a husband for 16 years, and I haven't got even one part of that I don't think I've got figured out. And I need daily to interact with God in prayer so that I can be all that Marla needs me to be. And as a pastor, my first need and desire and want, and my desire for you to understand, is that prayer has to be where you go first. It has to be where you go first. Now, I don't know your situation. I don't know what you're dealing with. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, I've tried prayer. Keep praying. I don't know your situation, but I do know that if you're anything like me, you're struggling to try and do it on your own. You're struggling to stand up and do your own thing and be your own person, and it's not working for you. I do know that. 1 Peter 5 reminds us, it says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time." There's a promise there. "And cast all your anxiety, all of your cares on Him, because He cares for you." When was the last time you went through the list, not only to not just to kind of assess it, but to process it and give it to God? When was the last time you cast all of your cares on Him? Maybe it's time to pray. Even in the midst of your doubt, it's time to pray, to come to Jesus, just like the Father did, and say, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." I want to pray for you right now, right where you are. I know that maybe it might feel uncomfortable because you're sitting in your living room, but I want you to close your eyes and to open your heart and your ears to hear what God has to say to you this morning. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you for your greatness. Thank you that when we are weak, you are strong. We know the devil is scheming and that he desires to keep us from seeking your help and your guidance in our lives. Father, do not let him win. Do not allow him to have a foothold in our lives. This week, give us a measure of your strength so that we might not give into discouragement, into deception, or into doubt. Father, we know and we believe that the battle belongs to you. We know that the victory is yours. Please remind us that our first response needs to be to fall on our knees and pray to you. Amen.
Would you sing this with us?
You are who you say you are, and you'll do what you say you'll do. You'll be who you've always been to us, Jesus. Our hope is in you alone. Our strength in your mighty name. Our peace
Church, thanks for being with us here today. I hope today's service impacted you, and if it did, I encourage you to hit that share button and to send it out to your news feed. And I want to let you know a few things as we're wrapping up today's service. We are actually heading into our rest week, and I want to encourage you to set some time aside and rest. And Pastor Jason was just talking how prayer needs to be our first response, and what a great practical way to do that during our Sabbath week. And I want to invite you to do that with us, and just maybe it's some time set aside in the evening, or maybe it's getting up a little bit early and just spending some time with Jesus. And so we're going to be continuing our Mark series here after our break, and I look forward to the weeks ahead. Take care, and we'll see you next time.